Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hello, my name is Jesse Vitelli. I'm an editor at Prima Games, and I'm back on another episode of Side Quests to talk about a very special game to me. This game is Viva Piñata, made by Rare back in the 360 era. And, a lot of people know about Viva Piñata, and it's one that's special to me because it really was one of those first games I kind of just fell in love with in the 360 era. Just the idea that you could, have these cute piñatas that were almost like Pokemon in a way. Like, you couldn't battle or trade them or anything, but you would foster this growth of your garden to attract certain piñatas, whether that was like the little worm, the whirly, or the sparrow mint, or the different things. And they'd start small. Like, you'd have like your worms and your sparrows and your frogs or whatever. But then you would move on to bigger ones like lions and swans and some more like regal piñatas. And I think the game really resonated with me because it was one of those first games where it wasn't entirely clear the requirements to get certain piñatas. So you would see one because the way the camera worked was you had your garden and it was always focused on your garden, but you could see on the perimeter the different piñatas that would kind of roam around, and they would lack color. They'd be black and white, and they wouldn't gain color until they became a resident of your garden. And so it was really the trying to figure out how to puzzle solve your way into getting the piñatas that you wanted. And I always found that really interesting because I'm notoriously am bad at video games. I'm not a great gamer, and I had to look a lot of this stuff up. And even then, I actually found Collective in my friend Greg, who wasn't really like a friend at the time, but was somebody I talked to in middle school. And he was playing Viva Piñata, and we kind of bonded over it. And we actually got picked on in middle school because we would talk about Viva Piñata all the time. And like the cool kids would be like, oh, these nerds, they're not playing Gears of War or whatever. And we were playing Gears of War on the side and other games, but Viva Piñata was one we just really liked to talk about and try to like figure out how to get certain piñatas. And like I said, we could look it up, but it was more fun to kind of have that collective, like, oh, did you get this one? Like, how'd you get this one? Blah, blah, blah. And going back and forth. And it actually like formed our friendship in a weird way, who I'm now very close with Greg. But that was definitely like the catalyst and the jumping off point for our friendship. And so Viva Piñata is very special to me for that specific case. But as like a game, I just think fundamentally it kind of gives you the tools to solve all of the puzzles in front of you, whether that is you need a certain amount of grass, or you need water, or you need a certain plant, or you need 2 of these piñatas in order to attract this other one. And a really good example of that is, I'm blanking on the name of it and it's killing me. I should have written it down. There's the snake piñata. And if you get 2 piñatas in that game to fall in love by meeting a set of requirements, and you build them a house, they will have a dance, a sex dance, if you will. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but they will dance. You will complete a little mini game, and then they will have a baby. They'll have a little egg, and the egg will hatch into another version of that piñata. And so there's like a whole breeding element to the game that's really exciting. But so the reason I bring up the snake though is because there was this really wild thing where when the snake egg was hatching, if you hit it with a shovel, it would become a snake with 2 heads. And that was the way you got the 2-headed snake. And the game never like told you to do that. And in fact, like if you busted the piñata eggs before they'd hatched, they'd break and you wouldn't have a new piñata. So you were never really incentivized to ever do that. But that was the requirement for getting this 2-headed snake. But it doesn't stop there, because if you romanced 2 2-headed snakes and did the same thing, you would get a 4-headed snake. And so it was just this like rabbit hole of breeding snakes and hitting the eggs with shovels, and just the real ridiculousness of the entire situation that like it was just a charming thing. And it was the moments like that, those aha moments, those puzzle solving moments of like, this makes my brain feel good and I feel good doing it. And that's just one small example. And the reason I'm picking Viva Piñata over the sequel, Viva Piñata Trouble in Paradise, is I think the additions to that game kind of ruin what the first game was. The first game was very much like make the garden you want to make, get the piñatas you want to get, level up, obviously, get new tools and stuff. But Trouble in Paradise kind of veers into like, what if there were different biomes and you manage different things, and then you like made the piñatas have certain characteristics to ship them off to like birthday parties, and like you would get rewards that way. And I didn't really like that system, to be honest. The like I said, the main game was very simplistic but deep, and didn't really have an overall direction outside of like keep leveling up, we'll keep expanding the perimeter of your garden, we'll give you some new tools, and they'll be like you'll have to overcome obstacles. Like there's this one dude that'll come into your garden and like bust up one of your piñatas if you don't get him out of there, and eventually you can buy a statue that when the statue's in the garden, that dude won't come into your garden to bust up your piñatas. And there's stuff like that, but there's just something so calming about just laying down a bunch of grass or a bunch of sand, or carving out a river throughout your garden so that your piñatas can enjoy water. And if you have a water-based piñata, obviously you need to have a certain amount of water. And there was just like all these like systems working together that I always really admired. And like, even if you're not super into the game, I think there is like a zen moment in that game of just sort of tending to nature and watching nature kind of interact, because sometimes nature is beautiful. Sometimes you have, a beautiful landscape and a bunch of wild animals kind of like roaming free, in this case, piñatas. And it's just like really nice to watch. But then sometimes a sparrow mint will fly into your piñata and eat one of your worms. And that's just nature, right? That's just the magic of it all, baby. But then the sparrow mint becomes a resident because it ate the worm and that was its requirement. And you go, oh, it is cyclical, right? Like, it is the circle of life. And I just think about where I was at in my life I played this game in 2006. Yeah, 2006. And it kind of scratched that Pokemon itch for me. But also just was unlike anything I had really played before. I wasn't like a big PC gamer or anything back in the day. So if there are games that were like this back then, I was not made privy to them. It was a really nice detour, I guess, from games like Gears of War and Halo and stuff like that at the time. It was something I could play when my friends weren't online, or I just didn't feel like playing with other people. I could just really get involved and build up my little garden. And I think the first time I saw this game was on G4 maybe, and then I went and rented it from Blockbuster, because I didn't own Viva Piñata for a long time. It was definitely like a rental thing that I just kind of kept going back to. It was always between that and Cameo Elements of Power, which is another Rare game. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting little project from there. And it's a game that Rare hasn't really ever gone back to, like a franchise. They made, like I said, they made Viva Piñata Trouble in Paradise. And then there was a TV show for a couple seasons, which is not great. I don't recommend it. If you're a fan of Viva Piñata, you could probably just skip that one. But I digress. And so, yeah, I don't know. Viva Piñata is a big staple of my life, and something I don't return to as often as I wish I could. The nature of the business is you're always playing the next new hot game. And I would love for them to make a Viva Piñata 3, because that means I could play it for work, right? I could cover it. And it's always my one thing I wish Rare would go back to. And Rare has a huge catalog. Luckily, the games are on Game Pass as part of Rare Replay. So if you've never played Viva Piñata and you have Game Pass, I mean, go play that game. That game is magical. And I think like one other point I want to make, and it's less about the game and more about just my personal life, is like when I was younger, oh my God, I'm old now, but when I was younger, Viva Piñata was really important to me just because I think it showed me that I wasn't afraid to play games that were deemed uncool, like by middle school standards. I think we all have a point in our life where we go, oh, I'm too cool for that. Like everyone kind of has that with Pokemon at one point. They're like, I'm too old and cool for Pokemon. And Viva Piñata was like a good reminder that like, no, video games are cool, at least to me, and that's what's important. And I could like this game that might be deemed a kid's game or, not the cool thing, but if it's bringing me enjoyment, that's what's important. And so Viva Piñata will always have a special place in my heart for that exact reason. And I really implore y'all to play this game, because it is unlike anything I've really ever played. I really don't have a good comparison outside of like, oh, the piñatas are kind of like Pokemon, which I've made before, but the game itself is totally, totally different. And I think there's a lot of really interesting puzzle solving, as well as just nice, peaceful moments of just gardening and trying to like be with nature. And all the characters are really zany and kind of out there, and I really do appreciate that. but yeah, that's my time. And like I said, I'm Jesse Vitelli, editor of Prima Games. Thank you for having me on another episode of Side Quests, and happy gaming.
Hey,
Oh, hey, Jeff.
what's going on, guys?
Oh, talking about Superman.
Oh, cool. I could talk about Superman.
I could talk some more about Superman.
We know.
I'll bet a few people would want to get in on this.
I'm down.
You know it.
That sounds like fun. I'll do it.
Cool, let's do it. We can call the show Men of Steel.
And you can find it at certainpov.com.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yay.
CertainPOV.com.